Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I know I'm always excited for every episode, but I can honestly tell you that I'm particularly excited for today's episode because not only am I very much looking forward to my conversation with today's guest, but I will tell you that her business is something that all of us as entrepreneurs need because this pertains to us not giving ourselves merely another job that relies on us to always be there, to always be working. And I love how much she emphasizes building a business that doesn't require us and where we are not the bottlenecks. So let me introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Christy Cox. Christy is the founder of VeriScale and the creator of the Founder Freedom System, which is a flexible growth framework designed to meet overwhelmed solopreneurs exactly where they are. Yes, not just entrepreneurs, but we're especially calling out all of you solopreneurs out there, which I know are so many of you in our worldwide audience. Whether you're ready to DIY with strategic templates or you want the full done-for-you transformation, Christy helps founders escape the bottleneck by building a business that can actually run without them. With options for every growth stage and budget, she bridges the gap between solopreneur and scaling a successful business, helping visionary founders reclaim their time, build real systems, and step confidently into the CEO role that their business needs. And on top of that, maybe you get to take a vacation here and there, which is obviously so near and dear to all of our hearts when we talk about freedom. So I'm excited about this one. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Christy Cox. All right, Christy, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Heck yes, especially since we're talking about not just building successful businesses, but building businesses that maybe we can take a little step away from Christy. So I'm excited to get into that stuff. But before we do, take us beyond the bio. Who's Christy? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Yeah. So, again, thank you for having me here today. So I started my first business back in 2015. I kind of fell into entrepreneurship a little bit, where I was working in finance up until 2009, and I lost my job like so many of us did at that time. And I didn't really know the next steps that I wanted to take. And so I had another person who was local to the community that I was in that had started a business in his garage, and he actually ended up growing that to be a multimillion-dollar hunting company or a brand in the hunting industry. And so from that, I had an opportunity to learn a ton from him. He kind of let me have free reign on the roles that I had within that company. And, in 2015, after my daughter was born, I actually ended up starting my first business. And then shortly after that, another opportunity kind of fell in mine and my husband's lap as he was retiring from the Marine Corps. We chose to keep going down that particular path. And during that time, we actually ended up building this multi-million-dollar company, but what we found is that it didn't really align with the life that we wanted. He was gone most of the month on sales calls. We had 2 young kids at the time. We were both working in an industry we didn't particularly love. And so from that, I kind of started to, or the two of us just kind of started to talk about what aligned with the life that we did want to create. And during this time, I also stepped out and took a different job with a separate company who taught me a new definition of leadership that really made a big impact in my life and in the decisions that we were making around this business that we had. And so as we started to talk about it, we made the decision to sell that company. We actually made the decision to take our kids and hit the road for a couple of years and travel around and see what we could of our national parks and this great country that we live in. And I decided to start a different business that did align with, what I wanted for me and what we wanted in our life, and to help other entrepreneurs kind of maybe avoid some of the pitfalls and the millions of mistakes that I made along the way in those first couple of businesses.
Yeah, I love that overview for so many reasons, Christy. But first and foremost, that's going to pique a lot of listeners' ears is in attention, is they're going to say, a multi-million-dollar business, that's what I want. But they don't realize all of those things that you already called out, that you actually, sure, you gained a lot of revenue, but you decreased your time independence. You decreased your location independence. When we talk about freedom, it's much more than just money. Talk to us about that, because you've seen seen all different phases of businesses. And when I say phases, I mean both dollar-wise, revenue-wise, as well as employee-wise, as well as workload-wise. There's so many different considerations. I'd love some of your insights there because listeners haven't probably experienced those millions of things you ran into.
Yeah, I think just as you were saying and as you shared there, it's like it's very easy to get wrapped up in the thinking that the revenue goal is the true goal of what we're trying to create and build in our lives and the thing that we're chasing. And so one of the first things like we even work through in the Founder Freedom System is getting really clear on the vision that you want for yourself and for the business that you're creating, and specifically for your ideal role in the business. What I find with a lot of my clients is they don't necessarily want to step out completely from the client service role, but they want to build something that really enables them to live in a particular zone of their business and then to really step into that role of CEO. And I think it's really important to start to get clear on that, and then also to really think about what you do want to build. Do you want to run a full team of 10, 20, 50 people? Do you want to keep it small? What does that look like for you? Do you want to maintain some contact with your clients, and at what level? And from there, we can kind of reverse engineer and build the business that gives you the freedom that you want. Do you want to work a full, for some of us, we don't mind working 60 hours a week if it's in a dedicated part of the business, like really drives our creativity. But for others, like we don't want to work that much, and we can build systems in either capacity to help create those types of things for you, both in your business and in your life, because honestly, like the two have to be married and they have to work together and be aligned in order for your business to really work for you.
I feel like that's one of the probably downsides of the entrepreneurial mindset is that we're actually too willing to work sometimes. And particularly when I look back, I started my first business when I was 19. And if I had to sum up my 20s, it was just that I was willing to hustle, sometimes to a detriment, is that I was willing to do all of the work. And of course, I was a solopreneur at times. I was a co-founder at times. I had a team of 20 at my biggest as far as my team size went. And Christy, all of that made me realize that when you're a business owner, you have to wear a lot of different hats. You, especially when you're a solopreneur, you have to be responsible for sales. You have to be responsible for marketing. You have to stay on top of your books. You have to do all of these things. So maybe some listeners are hearing you talk about that dream goal of being a CEO and thinking, how can I be CEO when I'm also COO, CFO? How do you start to manage these things, especially when it's a one-person team? Does your message state that we have to hire people? What does that look like? How do we work around that?
No, you don't necessarily have to hire people. I think what's super important is, again, like getting intentional in what you want to build. And it can look like, hiring one simple virtual or executive assistant on the back end, as long as you're specific about the experience and the skill level that you need from that person. It could also look like we go in and we like proactively set up some automations on the front end and better build out some of your systems to give you a little more freedom, because it's like you were just saying, like you wear so many hats. And so if we can set up some really simple automations that are built out of a very specific workflow to maybe automate the first part of your client journey or the last part where you're maintaining feedback and you're a nurture campaign, that can free you up from a couple of roles within your business that you're already working in so that you can dedicate more time to other areas. And as you start to see that freedom progress in each area, then you can start to really feel the impact to create freedom in other areas, because when you get freed up from one, we can start to work on another. So it doesn't necessarily mean you need a team or a big team. It can, but it also could just look like, again, we're building out your systems and tools and automations to support you more effectively.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you clearly differentiate all of these things, because it's important to be intentional and strategic about what we set up. You keep coming back to systems and processes. It's so clear. Maybe we don't necessarily need to hire somebody, but we do need systems and processes. And you call out automations. And I'm going to introduce AI to the conversation because everybody wants to talk about AI these days. But I also feel like we kind of conflate AI with automations, which automations have existed for a long time. AI has existed for a long time. They can work together or they can be different. Christy, give us some of those real life use cases and examples of what these processes and systems and maybe automations, and if you want to go into AI, we'll inevitably go there later, but if you want to introduce that right now, how do all these things work together? What are the focus areas inside of our businesses? How do we start this from scratch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little dependent on the type of business that you have. And I'll just give you one specific use case scenario because I see this a lot, is a lot of my clients do have great partnerships with their clients, or some of them are project based. And then what happens is when they complete the project or something happens within that client relationship, that the communication completely falls off, and we forget to ask for feedback from the client on the project, or even on the partnership that we had. We forget to go back and kind of remind them that we have these services if we launch different products in the future, because we don't have something set up on the back end to continuously remind them that we're here and that we do these things and that we do care. And that so that's one of the very first things we start to examine within a lot of my clients' businesses when it comes to their relationships with their own clients, is how to do that. And so I use, specifically with a lot of my clients, I use Go High Level. There's a lot of different platforms out there, but you can just build out simple automations within there that will send out those emails, templated emails. They'll send them out, they'll fill them out with some specifics related to your business and the different tags that you can put in there. And it'll keep you top of mind with other people as you go forward. And that's just, I guess that's just one simple way that you can put it in there. We start to talk about AI. This is a part that I am focused on learning more about. And I think you've done a couple of podcasts on this lately, is learning more about how agents can play a role within your business specifically. So I think there's going to be a big part in the future that enables our agents to handle a lot of this and some of the other key tasks that a virtual assistant could handle for us. But I'm not quite there yet with my own business, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for exploration as we move forward into what that can do for our own businesses.
Which I think is especially exciting, Christy, because just having gone as deep into your business as I have ahead of you and I getting together today, it's so clear to me that you unlock a lot of powers and capabilities inside of someone. The fact that you're doing that, even saying, hey, the solution doesn't have to be AI. There's already existing solutions there that are going to equip you to operate more efficiently to the point where you can maybe take a vacation. That's powerful stuff. And I really want to talk to you about the bottlenecking, because all of us have felt like the bottleneck. And the reason why I specifically want to focus on the bottleneck part of what you do is I think we can be bottlenecks in our business whether we have employees or we don't. I've constantly felt that way. Even as our team has grown, that doesn't mean you get things off of your plate. In fact, a lot of times when we hired, I even more so became the bottleneck because things needed my time and attention. Part of that is processes, part of that is empowerment. There's so many different considerations there, Christy. But how do you map out all the different moving pieces? When you start working with a company, I'm so curious how you diagnose, hey, here's where we need to remove you as the bottleneck, because a lot of times we probably don't realize where we're the bottleneck.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And a lot of it just starts with that clarity that we talked about in the beginning. And that's really looking into, again, like your vision and your ideal role within your business. I'm very heavily invested in client experience. And so for a lot of my clients, I want to talk about what does your ideal client experience look like? And then we'll start to map out the client journey from end to end. So from that very first touch point all the way through the end. And then we'll start to identify where the founder is involved, but maybe we can, again, add some of those automations. We can add a little proactive leadership. So if you're answering the same questions over and over for all of your clients, like let's create a Loom video and an email template we send out to every single new client that addresses that going forward. And so you're not answering the same question on repeat. And I think by doing this and having that visual component and then also walking you through the process that you have with every single client, it becomes a lot clearer to a lot of the founders to start to see where they are bottlenecking their own business, particularly when they're a solopreneur or, a single founder that's wearing all the hats at one time. I always like to talk about, kind of 4 key bottlenecks with anybody's business, and that's people, priorities, processes, and performance. And so within each of these touch points in that full client journey, we can start to identify exactly where the bottlenecks are happening and then start to create the plan and work on the priorities. So what's first? Like, what do we need to get you out of first? And what is that going to look like? And then kind of move through the chain. And again, as you start to create that freedom, it starts to kind of roll forward and create an impact in other areas of your business where we can work through more and more priorities as we go forward.
Christy, I'm going to ask you this next question, because hearing the way you talk about this, I know how not ready I would have been for this message, particularly in my early 20s before I started to understand this stuff. And I'll tell you exactly why. It's going to be a bit more of a philosophical question, but I trust that you're going to guide us to somewhere actionable for listeners. Hearing you talk about this, and I love how you just say, let's map out your process. What happens? Where does it happen? And how involved are you? In my early 20s, and I don't think it matters about the age, I think it matters more about the entrepreneurial experience, but I would have said, Christy, what am I good for then? If we start replacing me in all of these things, what am I good for? Because like I said earlier, entrepreneurs love to hustle. We love to put that work in. These are our babies. We're doing this not just for freedom and money, but because of passion as well. What's your view on what we should be doing, what we should be good for in our businesses? Because it sounds like a lot of the goal of your work, and I think internally the goal for all of us, is to start to remove ourselves. What do we do instead?
I think that's a really good question. I actually hadn't really thought about it in those terms before, but when you do create that kind of freedom, and it is one of the reasons we talk about your ideal role in your business, it's like, everybody has an idea for like the intended impact that they want to create on the world. And for a lot of us entrepreneurs, that comes through whatever business venture we've invented. But we really need to dedicate your time to continue to evolve your business and strategize on how to move it forward to continue to build on the impact that you're creating. So if you're, really operating in those, $20 an hour tasks on the back end, like you don't have the space to really think through what those next steps are. And I think, you brought it up a minute ago, where it's such a pivotal time in, what's going on in the world and with AI. So now we've freed you up. Let's think about how we can apply AI to your business, or how we can use specific tools to make an even greater impact going forward. I think for a lot of us, and myself included here, is, we have a really huge opportunity here to take advantage of something that is really new and profound in our industries. And so, if we open, your space and your time again to start to think about these opportunities, with that entrepreneurial mindset, like, it's really, the possibilities are limitless. We just need to get you that time and space to really think about it.
Yeah, it's so true. And when I think about the process of you unlocking these founders and removing them as the bottlenecks, I would imagine that the message that they hear and receive, whether you're explicitly stating it or not, is they do have to let go of some of that control. They do have to trust the systems, in some cases trust the team, trust the process of what you help them set up in their businesses, which I can just tell you this because we hear from a lot of our listeners around the world, is they have that belief of, well, nobody can do this as good as I can do this. I have to be involved in this. Christy, how much of your work is focused on helping people reframe that mindset, the anti-delegation mindset? How do you help them to cede that control?
Yeah, and I've had this mindset myself in the past. I think just like you said, all of us as entrepreneurs have had it, and a lot of times what I just share with them is that it's only through past experience and my own failures of realization in this area that I've really learned and grown from this to the point of, I've learned that, even a lot of the virtual assistants out there, if you give them specific delegated tasks, they do it better than I do, because I just don't have the time and space to dedicate to being the expert in everything, and nobody really does. And so, that's one of the first things that I share. And then what happens usually is we run something on a trial basis, and after they start to kind of get that comfort level with what they're doing and that confidence in what either the other person or the particular software platform is doing for them, then we can kind of start to run into other things. So there's always that first gap in the beginning to start to bridge some of these things. And if the founder's not at a wall where they're just like, I have to get some stuff off my plate, like, it may take a little bit longer, but as they kind of start to build that confidence in everything that we're working on, then more and more they're more willing to give up other things as they go into the future.
Yeah, well said. A few times in our conversation, it's already popped up where you've talked about, well, we map out what you do with clients, what you do for your projects, what you do operation-wise, which leads me to ask you, When is the right time for us to focus on this? Does somebody need to have clients already? Do they need to be at a certain revenue threshold or size? Or maybe it's a pain point where they say, Christy, I'm working all the time. How the heck do I balance all of these things? When is it too soon? Because I noticed that on your frequently asked questions section of your website. And I think it's so brilliant because I always defer on air. I always share that Chinese proverb. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Is that the answer here? But of course, you know that your clients have budget considerations. You know all the different phases of business. There's a lot of different things to think about. So what's your answer there, especially for those solopreneurs out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is exactly like you said and like you shared, just, the best time really is today. And it doesn't have to mean that we work through the end to end. Like I said, I have a couple of different ways that I work with a lot of my clients because I do know that there are budgetary considerations, from the onset of your business and even through those first few years. And so what it can look like to work together really can be somewhat customized. And I do have even a DIY option that, if you're really limited and you do want to do a lot of the things yourself, I can give you the foundational tools to help put that into your business yourself. And so that way you do save a little bit of the cost aspect of it, but you also, get the knowledge to really go forward. But I mean, I think the best time for even just the clarity piece is yesterday because, like I shared earlier, the last thing you want to do is build the wrong business. I did this for myself. I got 5 years in with the wrong business, only to realize it didn't align with what I wanted in my life and my husband's life. And so I think that, the more clarity you can gain in the beginning and the more that you can set up some of these systems and tools in the beginning, the better off you will be as you start to grow and scale. Because the one thing I do know is that when you hit this place where suddenly all the things start to click and you sign 5 clients at one time, that's the point when you start to get way too overwhelmed to go back and backtrack and put these in retrospect or in the past when you had the time to kind of sit down and do it and make the space for it.
Yeah, I love those points that you just made. It's important considerations, and you kind of teased something, Christy, that I do want to put you on the spot for to talk a little bit more in depth, and that is your services. I see a lot of businesses. Obviously, I interview entrepreneurs for a living, and I will say publicly that the way that you structure your offerings, not only does it clearly reveal that you understand your clients and your ideal clients extraordinarily well, but I love the fact that you've mapped out solutions at all different stages and all different levels for them. So I want to put you on the spot a little bit to talk about how you service people at different levels. The DIY way, the done for you, it sounds like you've got a little bit of done with you as well mixed in there. So because just from an offerings perspective, I think what you do is so brilliant. I'd love for you to share that with our audience too.
Yeah. And thank you for asking about it. I've been a solopreneur and I've been at that place in the past where I knew I needed to hire someone or get stuff off my plate and I didn't know how to do it. And I know that the budgetary constraints are a very real part of your business when you're operating solo and maybe you're just now hitting, the $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 mark and you need to do a lot of things, but you just don't have, there's a cash flow constraint there. And so I did really build out what I'm doing with a lot of intention to be able to support solopreneurs and those early stage founders in getting to that next level. Because, that really is where my passion lies because again, I've been there in the past and I know what it's like to try and bridge that gap and get to that next stage where you can really afford the full-time or the fractional roles in a more specific way. So you can now afford the fractional CFO or COO in the more specific roles. You can't afford that in the beginning. And so this really gives you that opportunity to set everything up so that when you do get to that place, you can now make that leap much more easily going forward. So yeah, I have a DIY model, a DW, done with you, and a done for you model. So if you want to fire yourself from everything, that exists in there as well. And then I do work with people sometimes just on that strategy and alignment piece. Like, let's just get the clarity down in your business for now. And then when you're ready, we'll move into that next phase where we start to really implement the systems and tools in your business.
Yes, I love that. Christy, I'm going to continue putting on the spot here because obviously you and I talked a little bit off the air, and what I really appreciate is the fact that you practice what you preach, and you talk about someone potentially firing themselves from their role because of setting up systems and processes and teams and automations that help them do so. But remember, the point is that we love our businesses. It's so clear to me that you love your business, but what I really admire and what I'm excited for you to share with listeners is the fact that you love your business in alignment with your life. You've already shared with us the story about you and your husband both experiencing the wrong business and obviously shifting things, but you're traveling around, going in a camper while also leveraging Starlink, which I think is incredible technology, and I'm glad that it enables you to be here with us today. But you're doing all these things while also living the life that you want to live. Talk to us about the lifestyle of Christy, the entrepreneur, not just the subject matter expert we're talking to today.
Yeah. So, again, thank you for asking. And we do love Starlink. And I think we talked a little bit about operating 5G and Starlink to try and bridge the gap of internet needs. I'm sitting outside Yosemite right now with a lot of trees. And so, we need this connectivity in a way that maybe others don't always need. But so, I really did build this business with a lot of intention because we are traveling around the country. The original plan was 1 year, then it went to 2 years. Now we're not sure when we're going to head back to North Carolina, but we wanted to have the space to be able to really get out and explore. My husband does a lot of the homeschooling and with the girls and the logistical planning of where we're going to go. But I still need to create the space and the time to be able to go out and see, some of these wonderful national parks that we have around the country and just really, get out and explore. It does not mean I don't, I work extremely limited hours, but I am extremely intentional with the time that I do spend in the business and how I spend it. I already have a virtual assistant within my business, and I'm actually getting ready to or considering hiring another one. So, it's building it out in a way that makes, this kind of lifestyle possible for me and for my family as we go forward.
Yes, that is so exciting. I want to talk to you about the concept of hiring because actually, hold on. I'm going to read this out loud for listeners because when I read this sentence, Christy, I was like, we have to talk about it on the air. And that's around the concept of hiring. You talk about the fact that you've already hired and it sounds like you're about to be in another hiring cycle as well, which is incredible with the growth that you're having. That's super exciting. But a lot of people, hiring's the hardest thing to get right. And one of your FAQs says, I've tried hiring before and it didn't work out. How is this different? Here's the part that I really want to read. Most hires fail due to unclear roles. We build the system before the hire so they succeed on day one. Talk to us about that hiring approach because Christy, increasingly I'm convinced that's the answer right there, and I don't think we talk about it enough publicly.
So I'm going to give a little credit where credit is due because I think you talked to Dave from Nimble, who I previously worked for. And so some of this and what I learned actually came from him and from my role within that company as well. And that, we do have to be intentional with the outcomes that we want to achieve and the roles specific to the people. A lot of people go in, and I'm going to talk about this specifically related to virtual or executive assistants. When we are cash constrained, a lot of times it does make sense to hire someone offshore to do some of the support work on the back end. But I think a lot of people go into it and they just say, I just need a virtual assistant. And then they try to hire someone without being very specific about what they're looking for. So you do have a specific tech stack that they need knowledge in. You do have specific things, like I said before, we map out the client journey. There are specific roles and skills that they're going to need to be successful in your business. And then we give them some key metrics to start to measure. How much of your time do you want them to take off? How much do you want them to be dedicated to, maybe it's customer support, or maybe it is specifically in lead gen. How much time do you want them to be dedicated, and what does success look like in that? Are they actively generating, 30 new leads a month for your business? We can measure that and we can start to talk about it. And when you start to get really specific on the role and the outcomes that they're going to produce, then we can start to really coach each of our employees, whether it's that offshore talent or it is somebody, it is a US-based person that's working, maybe as a project manager within your business. We can start to really actively coach them toward what success does look like. And that is really important in any role that you hire for in your company. If you don't have that kind of clarity, I think it just opens up the possibility of a lot of the possibility for misalignment. And misalignment is really the number one cause for either your clients or your employees leaving is, if they don't know what success is, they don't know they're doing a good job or not doing a good job, then they can't really be successful going forward.
Boom. That is such a good way for us to have that awareness. You've talked about the clarity from the very beginning to the very end of this conversation. And I think that that's so important for us to have the clarity of, hey, what's misaligned? And Christy, the fact that you gave a shout out to Dave Olson, the founder of Nimble, who was with us for episode 1177. I love that reference. So listeners, if you do want to see Dave Olson in action, it's episode 1177. Christy, I asked this question to Dave at the end of our conversation, and I'm going to ask it to you as well. I have no idea which direction you're going to take this in, but that is, what's your best advice for listeners? I feel like we talked about so many valuable things and a lot of big questions that people will have to ask themselves from here. And you already know we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys. So as a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I think that's always a really good question. I would say, one of the biggest things is to start to take action. I mean, I'm very big on clarity and intention, but you can't actually create any movement or move forward without taking any action. And so even if you're having an idea and you're not quite sure about it, you can talk about it with a few people and start to get, some clarity on whether it's good. But the more movement that you have and the more that you start to take action, the more you're going to progress in whatever it is that you want to do. And then make sure you're just paying attention to the results as you do it, because that's going to give you the signals on whether or not you should iterate or make some changes as you go forward.
Ooh, I love that advice. Christy, you have been methodical. You've been intentional from start to finish. That is exactly what I knew that we'd be getting from you here today. And here's the cool thing is I've teased your website quite a bit. I don't always do that on the air, but I just think that yours is laid out in such a way that you show how deeply you understand the people that you work with and, of course, the people that you want to work with. You've got a demo on your website. You've got a really cool video. Immediately, I recognize that's from your camper. People can see the fact that you're on the go, practicing what you preach, building a business that you love and a business that helps others. So this doesn't need to be the end of people's journeys with you, Christy. Drop those links on us. Where can listeners go to find out more about you and all the great stuff that you're up to?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Christy Cox. Or go to the website. It's VeriScale, VERI scale, SCALE.ai. And you can find me in either of those places, and don't hesitate to even reach out by email. I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes, and listeners, you already know the drill. You don't have to remember the link. You don't have to worry about spelling. Click right on through from down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Christy, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.